Between 2021 and 2023, 9% of nonprofits quit applying for foundation grants entirely. They decided that the revenue they were getting just wasn't worth the time that they were spending. And honestly, for organizations that are still using a traditional approach to grant strategy, the math has gotten to be pretty brutal. I think that 9% looked at a very real problem, but actually reached the wrong conclusion. Because shifts in grant trends are also creating some pretty big new opportunities in foundation grants. And new ways of using tech for grants is making it easier than ever to take advantage of those opportunities for organizations that are shifting their grant strategy. In this video, I'm going to walk you through exactly what they're doing differently. It's basically a 4-step playbook, and the funding ecosystem is shifting in a way that makes this exactly the right moment to run that playbook. So by the end of this, you'll have a very real picture of what a future-ready grants strategy and pipeline could look like for your organization. But let's start with defining the problem. Basically, why the inherited grants playbook has stopped working. For one thing, the number of nonprofits in the United States, at least, has roughly tripled over the last 30 years. 575,000 up to more than 1.5 million. But total foundation giving over that time, it's roughly flat in terms of real dollars. So we've got 3 times as many organizations, same pool of money. It's essentially a structural, systematic problem and not a tactical one. And then the per application math doesn't help either. So as organizations have gotten more and more sophisticated about writing grants and invested more and more in it, most proposals are having a median cost between $1,500 and $10,000. But acceptance rates are sitting at anywhere from 10 to 30%, depending on what statistics you look at. And so while we all celebrate the wins, the full cost of those losses and of our entire grants program almost never makes it onto a dashboard that we show anybody. And then there's a problem that's underneath all of it and related but different. More than half of nonprofits, 52% in a survey, reported that they have modified or created programs specifically to fit available funding instead of their own strategies about how to deliver the best impact. And so that's not a grant writing issue. That's an issue with grants literally rewiring our organizations from the outside in. So you put it all together, and the inherited approach creates 3 problems at once. Number 1, inefficiency. So we count when we win, but we never necessarily account for all of the time and energy and the effectiveness of actually applying for each grant. Number 2, distortion. So the way that grants are funding this sector over the last several decades has shifted to the point where the funding bends what we're actually doing rather than being driven by what our actual stakeholders say they need. And then number 3, dependency. That when we create these brand new programs that are chasing after funding, when that funding goes away, all of a sudden our programs are tied to funders whose priorities can shift really easily. So instead of the money following the work that matters, we end up tied and dependent to these funders where that is likely to shift right from under us. But none of this is anyone's fault. We all inherited this nonprofit system that was designed for a sector that doesn't exist anymore. And that's what we talk about all the time at the Pro Impact Project. But then here's where this flips. And the thing that I don't think is getting talked about enough, that we're seeing more and more when we look around the sector. While the inherited playbook has been getting harder and harder, the funding landscape itself has been shifting in ways that are creating opportunities for organizations that shift with it. And so there's 3 trends in particular that are driving that. Number 1, capacity building grants. So those grant proposals are having success at a much higher rate. Capacity building and training grants come in at a 46% success rate, well above those averages that we talked about earlier. But how many of our organizations know exactly what it means to have a great capacity grant building strategy and what that looks like? Number 2, general operating support has nearly doubled. So this is sort of related to capacity building, but 2 decades ago, unrestricted Gen Ops made up about 20% of foundation giving. And today, it's closer to 38%. More than 40% of foundation leaders said that they've increased their unrestricted giving last year in 2025 alone. And then number 3, multi-year funding is now becoming more and more of a norm rather than an exception. 87% of grant makers now say they are willing to offer multi-year funding, up from 79% just a decade ago. And so that's the kind of commitment that makes project-first, multi-stage investments actually viable. So we put these three things together, and that's what helps flip the picture. Funders are moving towards this more flexible and capacity-based ideas with longer commitments and the kind of strategic time-boxed investments that a project-first approach is exactly designed to pursue. So the opportunity here is not just to win more grants. It's literally to run your grant strategy in a way that is even more aligned with directly growing your organization's impact. But taking advantage of this opportunity requires something that's beyond the scope of a development team, because these true capacity building strategies and ideas for these great programs that are focused on potential investments all across the organization's teams and these sort of multi-department investments can only be overseen and driven by the ED. And that process starts with asking a totally different question than the standard process has asked. In the inherited nonprofit playbook, the grant strategy and process usually starts with one simple question: who funds our mission? It sounds logical, but it's also the question that is essentially capping what our grants programs can currently do. So future-ready organizations are starting with an entirely different question, which is, what specific strategic investments does our organization need to make, or could we make, that would most directly result in a big increase in our impact? So that one shift, that question at the beginning, shifts everything and changes everything that happens downstream. Because when you start with these project ideas, not the funder and not just the core programs and mission, your grant strategy becomes an extension of your overall organizational growth strategy, and not a workaround, and not this over-reliant and over-dependent center of it. So you're not asking funders to underwrite your existing programs. You're identifying specific time-boxed investments that your organizations need to make, and then finding the funders whose recent grants in capacity building or Gen Ops most align with those types of capacity building that funds exactly the kind of work and project that you're trying to do. And so then when you do that, your funding targeting gets tighter, because the project fit is a narrower and narrower filter than just mission overlap. So proposals get sharper because a specific project is easier to make the case for than just fund our core programs because you fund other programs that are like ours with a similar mission. So your win rates go up because you're actually applying to grants that your specific project is a really compelling actual fit for. And your mission drift stops because the funding is for deliberate investments, not bending your programs and creating something new just towards available funding. This is the strategic shift that makes the whole thing work. You can't change how competitive the sector is, and we can't make foundations just to start giving out more money. But you can change what you're asking them to fund and how compelling and aligned that ask is with what they've already funded. So that single change is what separates organizations that are still running the inherited model from organizations that are repositioning to capture where the funding is actually going. But what does this look like in practice? So there are 4 steps to a future-ready grants pipeline. And before I walk through them, a quick heads up. Each one of these steps relies on, or is at least made a lot more efficient by, using technology to be able to do it more efficiently. And there are free and low-cost options for doing that at pretty much every step. But there's also one specific tool that I recommend that's sort of perfectly built for running this exact pipeline. And I'll get to that at the end of the video. But for right now, we'll focus on this framework, and then we'll get to the tech later. So step 1, brainstorm potential projects for investment. The goal at this stage isn't to decide which projects you're going to pursue. It's to put enough good candidates on the table that the rest of the pipeline has something real to work with. And there are a few categories that tend to generate strong candidates. New one-time program opportunities. So critical distinction, critically, this is not a new ongoing program, but a new one-time offering within a program model that you already have, or digital growth infrastructure, so digital storytelling campaigns or audience building campaigns, or tech growth infrastructure, so some sort of specific software or piece of technology that, again, all of this needs to be tied to specific impact outcomes, but these investments can make it happen, or impact data and evaluation work or systems to be able to better measure and improve the impact that you're delivering. And I think the biggest mistake and most common mistake at this stage is thinking too narrowly, staying in that box of what things will funders actually get behind, where by the end of step one, you should have probably 8 candidates that are on your list of very different projects. So then step 2, research the funder landscape to match with each project. So this is where the traditional approach and the future ready approach split really hard. The traditional approach searches by issue area, by mission, with funders who care about your sector. And the future ready research works almost the opposite. You start with this project and then you search for funders who their recent grants fit best with the specific type of project that you're doing. Now, of course, even when you do this approach, they still need to fund your mission, although more and more foundations are actually getting agnostic or broader about the type of missions that they fund. And then for a leadership development project, you're looking for funders who have made multiple capacity building grants in the last 24 months, not funders who just say they care about our sector. So for a new AI tool, for instance, you want to find funders who've recently backed technology infrastructure or even AI infrastructure, not ones whose mission statement just mentions innovation. The signal here is that the recent grant data needs to really drive that match, not just the stated priorities when possible. So in practice, this turns into a really big shift. A funder list where it's built around separate lists of funders for each project-specific recent grant evidence is dramatically more targeted and dramatically has a higher likelihood of converting. So now on to step 3, build tightly aligned proposals and do it really efficiently. So use that research to assess which opportunities to apply for and also how to apply. Every reason that a project scores well for a specific funder, for instance, the funder's recent grants, the themes that they're emphasizing, the outcomes that they funded, all of that should flow directly into how you specifically draft the proposal for that funder. And in the traditional approach, every proposal is sort of custom written from scratch because there weren't really tools to be able to help that process. But in the future ready approach, the proposal is generated using tech from 3 structured inputs: the project description that you created in step 1, the research about why it's a fit from step 2, and then the specific funder's language and recent grant patterns as part of step 2 and the third element of it. So your team makes these strategy decisions on how exactly you're going to position the proposal based on those 3 inputs. Then you use technology, and especially AI, to be able to execute that as efficiently as possible. But it's got to be the humans who are making those strategic decisions about what's a fit. So the result is not just faster proposals, it's tighter ones, with each application being created more efficiently to produce more meaningfully likely to win proposals. The Eversight Foundation used exactly this kind of discipline of approach to push their grant success from 14% to 22%, and the lift came from shifting away from, and quoting them here exactly, the idea of let's just fill out 10 grant applications and hope, and towards an approach where every application is more specifically and tightly aligned between a Venn diagram of what the funder is actually funding and what will actually help your organization grow your impact. Now, step 4 is to manage this entire pipeline like a system. So by this step, the strategic work has been done, and this is exactly where most grants programs lose a lot of the efficiencies that they've just made, where the post-submission life cycle is one of the most underrated parts of all grants operations. So make sure deadlines don't get missed, that renewals aren't forgotten, and especially that reporting doesn't get scrambled at the last minute, so that these funder relationships that often take years to build don't just quietly erode, because none of that would show up in the grants report. But all of it shows up in next year's win rate for proposals. So a future-ready pipeline treats this entire system as an automated post-automation system with the deadlines across applications, reports, renewals, the reporting cycles, actually matching that outcome data to the actual grant proposal, renewal management, because this multi-year funding doesn't just renew automatically, it usually renews when the funder is given a reason to, and the funder relationship cadence, because every active funder is its own relationship. Some organizations use this approach and are applying for fewer grants than ever before, and some are applying for a lot more grants than ever before. But the main distinction is that for each individual grant proposal, this new approach should take less time in total and result in a higher success rate than the old system. And while there are several tools that can help at different stages, the one that I've been absolutely blown away by for, again, being built to handle every step of this type of process is Instrumental. They are one of our Pro Impact picks. And if you're not familiar, those are all tools that we've vetted, that we use, and that we recommend to future-ready EDs in our community. And like all of the Pro Impact picks, we have a partnership with Instrumental where they contribute a percentage of each sale through Pro Impact picks back to Pro Impact so that it funds more free content like this for EDs working to build future-ready organizations. So the reason why we recommend Instrumental so strongly is because I think it is the strongest fit for the future-ready grants approach right now, and that reason is structural. That a lot of grant tools are built around one piece of the pipeline or doing research about the sort of old-fashioned way of applying for grants, but Instrumental is built around this project-based approach to the entire process. They literally have project functionality in step one, where you can just draft a version of a project and capture each potential project as a structured, reusable piece of content asset. Then a funder database as step two that's filtered on recent grant activity and not just the stated priorities, which is that big shift that the entire future-ready approach depends on. And then they actually have AI writing tools for step three that help create drafts that reflect exactly why a project fits that funder. And then an entire grant management system for step four. The full life cycle can be managed all in one place. So if you want to take a closer look at Instrumental, I've put together a full breakdown on the Pro Impact Picks page, which is in the comments and about section below, of what it does well, what kind of organization it's the best fit for, how to think about whether it's the right fit for your organization, and how to make the case for making this investment to your board. And you can book a demo through the Pro Impact Picks page through our partner link that lives right there on the page. And then that's how they know that the recommendation came from us. But the future ready approach doesn't require Instrumental specifically. The principles are the same no matter what. And again, the real opportunity is not just winning more grants, although that's a huge part of it, but building this grant system that is targeted, efficient, strategic, and that specifically funds the investments that drive the type of impact growth that your organization is trying to achieve. So while the grants playbook that most of us inherited wasn't designed for this current modern sector that we live in, the good news is we don't have to keep running that playbook. And so if the way that we think about grants at the Pro Impact Project lines up with how you're thinking about strategy for grants or for your entire organization, we actually create a free newsletter for future-ready EDs that we would love for you to check out as well. The link is below. Thousands of EDs already receive it, and we would love to have you join and be a part of this movement to create more future-ready organizations. Thanks.